Hello, today I have a reading from A Course in Miracles. This is Chapter 7, The Gifts of the Kingdom, Section 10, The Confusion of Pain and Joy. Paragraph 1. The kingdom is the result of premises, just as this world is. You may have carried the ego's reasoning to its logical conclusion, which is total confusion about everything. If you really saw this result, you could not want it. The only reason you could possibly want any part of it is because you do not see the whole of it. You are willing to look at the ego's premises, but not at their logical outcome. Is it not possible that you have done the same thing with the premises of God? Your creations are the logical outcome of His premises. His thinking has established them for you. They are exactly where they belong. They belong in your mind as part of your identification with His, but your state of mind and your recognition of what is in it depend on what you believe about your mind. Whatever these beliefs may be, they are the premises that will determine what you accept into your mind. So going back to they belong in your mind, that would be your creations. Your creations belong in your mind as part of your identification with His, but your state of mind and your recognition of what is in it depend on what you believe about your mind. So we can believe that mind is joined. We can believe that we are a thought of God and everyone you see as else is a thought of God. We can believe that we are encompassed within the mind of God, that our mind, our true mind, not our false mind, that is kind of like an illusion we use to cover up our true joined mind. Our seemingly separate false minds disguise our true mind. Our true mind is loving, our true mind is pure, our true mind is clear, has nothing but innocence within it. It extends love because it is love. It extends love forever. So these are things we can remember and look at and be aware that everything else is an illusion I made to try to cover this up. But it's safe to remember this now. So your creations, the extension of love, belong in your mind as part of your identification with His, but your state of mind and your recognition of what is in it depend on what you believe about your mind. So we can just ask Holy Spirit to come in and help us remember what is true about our mind, our shared mind, or our minds. If it's appropriate to use that lens, maybe you want to look at it from the perspective that minds are joined. Okay, paragraph 2. It is surely clear that you can both accept into your mind what is not there, which is what we do when we're upset, and deny what is. Yet the function God Himself gave your mind through His, you may deny, but you cannot prevent. It is the logical outcome of what you are. The ability to see a logical outcome depends on the willingness to see it, but its truth has nothing to do with your willingness. Truth is God's will. Share His will, and you share what He knows. Deny His will as yours, and you are denying His kingdom and yours. Yet the function God Himself gave your mind through His, you may deny, but you cannot prevent. So there's the denial, which is the ego, which I'm clued into that I'm depending upon denial when I don't feel good. I'm depending on ego's denial of the function God gave my mind when I don't feel good. That's what's happening. But I cannot prevent it. God's will is my will, and this whole world of time and space I'm made to pretend that my will could be separate from God's and separate from yours. But really our will is unified harmonically with God's will. That's the truth of us, but we keep denying through what we seem to be churning out and experiencing in time and space. Yet the function God Himself gave your mind through His, You may deny, but you cannot prevent. So when I'm upset, I can remember there is a function that was given to my mind through God's mind. And looking away from this and forgetting it is what causes the upset, not something in the world. Ego will always tell me that something in the world I made caused the upset. But the upset is actually about pretending that I haven't been given a function. My mind hasn't been given a function through his, and I can't change it. This is changeless. Okay. Paragraph 3. The Holy Spirit will direct you only so as to avoid pain. Surely no one would object to this goal if he recognized it. The problem is not whether what the Holy Spirit says is true, but whether you want to listen to what he says. You no more recognize what is painful than you know what is joyful, and are in fact very apt to confuse the two. The Holy Spirit's main function is to teach you to tell them apart. What is joyful to you is painful to the ego, and as long as you are in doubt about what you are, you will be confused about joy and pain. This confusion is the cause of the whole idea of sacrifice. Obey the Holy Spirit, and you will be giving up the ego, but you will be sacrificing nothing. On the contrary, you will be gaining everything. If you believed this, there would be no conflict. So back to the problem is not whether what the Holy Spirit says is true, but whether you want to listen to what he says. When I'm upset, fearful, annoyed, I don't want to listen to what Holy Spirit says. And that's okay, because the spark of willingness in my heart cannot go out. It's always lit. There's nothing that can undo that spark of willingness. So if I allow that to expand and to remember Holy Spirit's voice is here, and that my happiness is connected to my willingness to listen to Holy Spirit's voice, then that puts things in a sane perspective for me. And if I turn ever so little toward that voice, it will make itself clear. The problem is not whether what the Holy Spirit says is true, but whether you want to listen to what he says. So I can't tell my joys and pains apart as I'm identifying as ego, because ego is going to tell me I love precisely what would cut me off from my wholeness, and I dislike precisely what would point back to our connection and wholeness. So to see this so comprehensively, like ego is always going to lead me away from my joy, my true joy, whether ego is trying to talk to me about what makes me joyful or what causes me pain. Ego's objective is to lead me away from the joy I share with you every time. So I can always stop and rest in my willingness to hear and use a moment to relax out of that resistance, relax out of thinking I know what makes me happy and what makes me unhappy. I don't actually know, but today's a day when I can start to remember. That was funny. Just as I was saying that, I saw a spark of light in midair. So yeah, that gives me motivation to remember to rest in my willingness. Okay. Paragraph 4. That is why you need to demonstrate the obvious to yourself. It is not obvious to you. You believe that doing the opposite of God's will can be better for you. You also believe that it is possible to do the opposite of God's will. Therefore, you believe that an impossible choice is open to you, and one which is both fearful and desirable. Yet God wills. He does not wish. Your will is as powerful as his because it is his. The ego's wishes do not mean anything because the ego wishes for the impossible. You can wish for the impossible, but you can will only with God. This is the ego's weakness and your strength. So I'm going to be aware of wishes kind of for and against specific things in time and space today. Those are the ego's wishes. Those are the ego's ideas about this will make me happy and this will make me unhappy. And as much as I can see where I've given up a lot of these ideas, I can also see a bunch of them where I have still placed a separate me in charge of deciding. I know what makes me happy and I know what makes me unhappy. So I see this as grounds for the undoing. Let it be undone today. And the ego kicks and screams against that because that's its very existence. The ego's wishes do not mean anything because the ego wishes for the impossible. So when I feel resistance or upset, I can remember that I'm believing thoughts about what makes me happy and what makes me unhappy that are meaningless. But there are meaningful thoughts, and there is meaningful guidance here for me, and I can stop and give myself a moment to align with that. Okay, the Holy Spirit, this is paragraph 5. The Holy Spirit always sides with you and with your strength. As long as you avoid His guidance in any way, you want to be weak. Yet weakness is frightening. What else then can this decision mean, except that you want to be fearful? The Holy Spirit never asks for sacrifice, but the ego always does. When you are confused about this distinction in motivation, it can only be due to projection. Projection is a confusion in motivation, and given this confusion, trust becomes impossible. No one gladly obeys a guide he does not trust. But this does not mean that the guide is untrustworthy. In this case, it always means that the follower is. However, this too is merely a matter of his own belief. Believing that he can betray, he believes that everything can betray him. Yet this is only because he has elected to follow false guidance. Unable to follow this guidance without fear, he associates fear with guidance and refuses to follow any guidance at all. If the result of this decision is confusion, this is hardly surprising. But remember that as impossible as this seems, a little willingness is enough. So we can always return to our spark of willingness. Okay, so back to believing that he can betray. He believes that everything can betray him. So I believe that I made this world of separation. I believe that I can betray God. And then I believe that anything in this world could turn against me. Something could turn against what I perceive to be my health. Some element of the world I made, it seems unpredictable, could seem to turn against my safety or the safety of others. Something in this world I made, it seems, it could independently from me seem to turn against my happiness, my peace, my sanity. But that's not true. This is a world I have imagined, and I have forgotten that I cannot betray God. I have forgotten that God's will is mine. I have forgotten that I can't do wrong, although I can imagine wrongdoing. So that explains why it seems that anything in this world could come and get me, because I set it up this way through my belief that I betrayed God. And now I believe anything at all could betray me. But this is a belief we can recognize and drop out of, and we can drop into the guidance of Spirit that's here for us. Spirit is loving, we're loving, God's loving, the guidance of Spirit is loving, and we have the chance to relax out of what opposes that guidance and into that guidance today. Okay, paragraph 6. The Holy Spirit is perfectly trustworthy, as you are. God Himself trusts you, and therefore your trustworthiness is beyond question. It will always remain beyond question, however much you may question it. I said before that you are the will of God. His will is not an idle wish, and your identification with His will is not optional, since it is what you are. Sharing His will with me is not really open to choice, though it may seem to be. The whole separation lies in this error. The only way out of the error is to decide that you do not have to decide anything. Everything has been given you by God's decision. That is His will, and you cannot undo it. So back to the only way out of the error is to decide that you do not have to decide anything. There's nothing I have to do. I don't have to decide anything because everything has already been decided. What I am and what you are together is not escapable. We can pretend to escape it and to deny it and to create a picture that denies what we are in this world of time and space, but it can't change what we are. We don't get to decide what we are. It just is what we are. And as we're willing to remember it, the world we seem to see and experience has a chance to reflect that back to us very directly. How loved we are, how loving we are all together, how innocent we are all together, what power we have harmoniously all together, what strength we have harmoniously all together. The only way out of the error is to decide that you do not have to decide anything. So what I, as a separate one, seem to decide is that there could be a world of fluctuation. There could be a world of lack of safety. There could be a world of lack of wholeness. There could be a world of lack of happiness. But that was never a real world. That was a pretend world I made with ego thought. And so I didn't even really decide that, because that doesn't exist. It seems to, but it doesn't. I can't decide what to be, and I can't decide what you are. That's already in place, and it can't be changed. And the more I remember this, the more I see that the whole idea of deciding is a fiction that I myself made up. I have done this thing, and it is this I would undo. But we can also connect that to, in time and space, it seems we have to make decisions, and then we can turn to Holy Spirit and say, decide for God for me. Basically, I don't know what I'm doing, and I need to be guided, and I'll do my best to open up to that guidance. Okay, paragraph 7. Even the relinquishment of your false decision-making prerogative, why was that so hard, which the ego guards so jealously, is not accomplished by your wish. It was accomplished for you by the will of God, who has not left you comfortless. His voice will teach you how to distinguish between pain and joy, and will lead you out of the confusion you have made. There is no confusion in the mind of a son of God, whose will must be the will of the Father, because the Father's will is His Son. His voice, back to His voice, will teach you how to distinguish between pain and joy, and will lead you out of the confusion you have made. So in our daily experience, where we notice how we're feeling, and we notice we don't feel good, we can notice where we've attached to hearing a voice that tells us what makes us happy and that tells us what makes us unhappy, and that this voice is actually wrong and it misdirects us, and that there is another voice to hear. This voice is trustworthy. This is our true voice, the voice of our shared will, the voice of our shared being, and it's here to hear. His voice will teach you how to distinguish between pain and joy, and will lead you out of the confusion you have made. So when I don't feel good and I find a thought I believe, a thought I have attached to, and I set it down, and I look toward the horizon and I remember something true, like I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing, of how I see things. We're all connected. We share one mind. And I don't know what's going on, but Holy Spirit can lead me. So every time I turn ever so little toward the remembrance that Holy Spirit is here and Holy Spirit can lead, I eventually see Holy Spirit leading everyone and everything to reflect back to us all the purity and innocence and beauty and strength and power of what we all are together. Okay. Paragraph 8. Miracles are in accord with the will of God, whose will you do not know because you are confused about what you will. This means that you are confused about what you are. If you are God's will and do not accept His will, you are denying joy. The miracle is therefore a lesson in what joy is. Being a lesson in sharing, it is a lesson in love, which is joy. Every miracle is thus a lesson in truth, and by offering truth, you are learning the difference between pain and joy. So back to the miracle is therefore a lesson in what joy is. So when I don't feel good, I have forgotten what joy is. But when I stop to find the thought I believed and set it aside and turn toward, I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing, I invite the miracle in. I'm willing to hear from sanity. I'm willing to hear from truth. I'm willing to remember what does make me happy. What is happiness? I'm willing to be shown. The miracle is therefore a lesson in what joy is. So it's always good news, because when I don't feel good, it means I'm misunderstood, and it means I'm on the verge, I'm on the precipice of allowing that misunderstanding to be cleared up. As long as I don't turn toward a judgment of anyone or anything in the world, which is habit, and which Spirit helps us undo, as long as I turn toward Spirit, I can receive many lessons of joy today. I can learn through rewards and not through suffering. As attached as I have been to seeing suffering seemingly outside of me and to experiencing suffering myself, Spirit is still here and Spirit can still guide. So I can turn toward and accept lessons of joy. And the prompt that I need to do it is always in my feeling. So if there's any lack of peace, any disturbance, I need to turn in the direction of lessons of joy and allow myself to be reminded through miracles of what joy is. Okay. Thank you for listening, and happy healing.